We've got to start a brown revolution and recognize the future of humanity depends on the soil. Thankfully, your judges, so open to new ideas, recognize something profound in our little project, and that it is tackling some of these serious problems of today. This is not an occasion for lecturing, much as I'd like to go on. So, allow me to tell the story briefly of how we got here into this position we are. When I graduated in 1955, aged 20, I went into the field into the game department of Northern Rhodesia, now Zambia, and I soon recognized that what I'd learnt at university and what I was seeing in the field didn't match up. And my whole education began all over again at that point. Wildlife was disappearing, and I was told it was due to poachers, and they were being poached out of existence, and my job was to track down poachers and catch them and so on. But I soon began to see that environmental degradation was the bigger issue, and that we in the national parks and game departments of Africa were actually a greater danger to the wildlife of Africa than poachers were, because you can re-establish them if you haven't destroyed the habitat. If the habitat is gone, they're gone forever. And we were the greater danger. From this point, it became easy to recognize that the fate of humans follows the fate of wildlife. If you're going to save one, you're going to save the other. So although I wouldn't have described myself as a people person, I began to take, the people that know me are laughing. I began to take a real interest in people. Why was it that despite our ability to put on the man on the moon, we could not solve problems as simple as this on the Earth? Why had no one solved the problem of worldwide desertification in over 10,000 years? These were things that went through my mind as I began to re-educate. Biodiversity loss, which is desertification, and climate change or climate crisis, as mentioned, are one and the same issue. And I simply could not accept that throughout history, no one could find a way to reverse desertification. It just didn't make sense. From early observations in wild situations, the first breakthrough came. I began to see an association between pack-hunting predators, big packs of lions, wild dogs, thousands of buffalo in herds, etc., and healthy grasslands, healthy rivers, wetlands. There was something there. And I likewise began to see that where we'd killed off most of this stuff and were burning the land to keep grasslands alive and had fewer livestock, I was seeing more bare ground, silting rivers, silting dams, people falling into conflict. There was some connection here with the wildlife. It was then that I turned to Smuts's work. Smuts, who followed Darwin's work, Smuts wrote Holism and Evolution and pointed to the operating principle in universe, or in the Darwin's work, as holism. And I began to realize that nature only functions in wholes and patterns that can never be understood by studying the species. That made sense. General Smuts, by the way, was a lawyer, a botanist, a soldier, a statesman, a philosopher, and he published Holism and Evolution 9 years before I was born. I still wish every scientist in the world would read it again. And he published 1 year before Bucky contemplated ending his life on that lonely shore, which is amazing to me, that connection. Now, Bucky recognized universe, as did Smuts, but from Smuts I got that operating principle of holism that I worked on. Now, these observations pushed me to stick with the problem through 45 years of increasing warfare, civil warfare, involvement, years of ridicule, going into politics and trying to end a war, rejection, character assassination, and I ended up in the United States as an exile. And through all those years, some academics, universities resisted this work, but we persisted with it. I say we, because it was an increasing number of people. Unfortunately, all that is natural, and it always happens, and it's nothing to do with people or anything else. Humans, when faced with new thinking, are threatened and do react like that. By the 1970s, I was working with increasing numbers of independent people, farmers, ranchers, wildlife scientists, and we were achieving amazing successes on the ground. but equally amazing failures. We just couldn't get consistency. And as you know, in science, we develop a hypothesis and we keep testing and testing. If it's not, we can't get consistent or repeatable results, we develop another hypothesis. Well, we kept persisting, and finally, in 1984, we started to get consistency. A little missing piece fell into place, and from 1984, we've seen that consistency. This missing piece was essentially how to simply make decisions towards what humans valued most in their culture, spiritual, material values, and their life-supporting system. In other words, to make decisions socially, environmentally, and economically correct to the best of our ability in any situation towards what we value most in our lives, what we today call holistic management. I would love to go on talking, but I must use my remaining time to thank people. Too many to name, but I'll try with some who've contributed most. For the entire idea of holistic management, I stood on the shoulders of much greater minds than mine, frankly. I'm a very simple, practical guy, if you get to know me. Jan Smuts, I would thank for providing the theoretical foundation. Sir Frank Fraser-Darling, who spent 6 months in the bush with me in Africa when I was a fanatical young man, and I would thank him for pointing my nose at the soil and saying it's all about soil, Alan, when I was trying to save elephants. And I thank him for that. André Bazin, the Frenchman, who discovered 50 years ago that overgrazing has got nothing to do with animal numbers, everything to do with time of exposure and re-exposure. A critical piece of the human puzzle he gave us 50 years ago, and I think